He was fine 5 minutes ago. The words didn't sound real even as they left my mouth, like they belonged to someone else standing in this cold, fluorescent hallway instead of me. Noah's small hand was still in mine. Too warm, too still, his fingers curled loosely like he was just sleeping, except he wasn't. The steady beep of the monitor filled the room, sharp and mechanical, counting seconds I couldn't breathe through. I kept replaying it in my head, over and over, like if I found the exact moment everything changed, I could undo it. The party had been simple. Just a small birthday gathering in our apartment. Balloons taped unevenly to the wall. A grocery store cake Noah had picked himself because it had blue frosting and cartoon dinosaurs. Nothing expensive. Nothing dangerous. That's what I thought. I remember the way Noah laughed when he blew out the candles. Cheeks puffed. Eyes bright. His whole world contained in that tiny moment of happiness. I remember thinking, just for a second, that maybe things were finally okay. Ryan was there, standing near the kitchen island, smiling like he always did when people were watching. Calm. Charming. Safe. That's what I had told myself about him. That's what I had believed. He handed Noah a drink. I didn't think twice about it at first. Why would I? He was my fiancé, the man I was supposed to trust. But something about the way he set the glass down afterward stayed with me. Too quick. Too careful. Like he didn't want anyone to notice, which is exactly why I noticed. I felt it before I understood it. That quiet shift in the air. That instinct every mother has. The one that doesn't ask permission before it takes over. Noah took a sip, then another, and then he stopped smiling. His hand tightened around the cup, just slightly, like something didn't feel right. Mom, he said, soft, confused. That was the moment everything tilted. The room didn't change. The music kept playing. People kept talking. But I heard nothing except my own heartbeat, loud and uneven, like it was trying to warn me. I moved toward him too fast, my chair scraping against the floor, drawing a few glances, but I didn't care. His eyes looked different. Not scared. Not yet. Just distant. What did you give him? I asked, my voice already breaking before the words were fully out. Ryan blinked at me, just once, like he needed a second too long to understand the question. And that was all it took. Because in that 1 second, I knew. I didn't have proof. I didn't have logic. But I knew. What did you put in his drink? I heard myself say again, louder this time. The room finally starting to quiet, attention shifting, the weight of every gaze pressing in. Noah swayed slightly where he stood, and I caught him before he could fall, dropping to my knees, pulling him against me, his head resting against my shoulder in a way that felt wrong. Too heavy, too still. Stay with me, baby. I whispered, my hands shaking as I brushed his hair back, searching his face for something familiar, something normal, anything. And that's when I felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, just a presence. Someone watching. I looked up, and across the room, near the doorway where the light didn't quite reach, he was standing there. Adrian Volkov. He hadn't said a word since he arrived. Had barely moved. But now his eyes were on us, steady, unreadable, like he had already seen how this was going to end before any of us realized it had begun. And for the first time since Noah's body went slack in my arms, I wasn't just afraid. I was certain of one thing. Whatever happened next wasn't going to be in Ryan's control anymore. I did not remember standing up, but suddenly I was no longer on the floor, no longer kneeling, no longer thinking, just moving, clutching Noah against my chest as if holding him tighter could force his eyes to stay open, his breathing to stay steady, his small heartbeat to stay with me, and everything around me blurred into noise, voices rising, chairs scraping, someone asking questions I could not hear, because the only thing that mattered was the way his head rested too heavily against my shoulder, the way his fingers no longer gripped my shirt like they always did when he was scared. And then a voice cut through it all, low, controlled, impossible to ignore, not loud but absolute, like it did not need volume to be obeyed. Clear the room. The words did not come from me, and yet everything responded to them. Conversations stopped, movement shifted, and for a second I thought maybe I imagined it until I looked up again and saw him already walking toward us, not rushed, not panicked, but certain, like every step had already been decided before he took it. Adrian Volkov moved through people, without touching them, and they still stepped aside, instinctively, like something in them recognized what I had just begun to understand, that this man did not ask for control, he existed inside it. and when he reached us he did not look at Ryan, did not look at anyone else. His attention went straight to Noah, then to me, sharp, assessing, taking in everything in a single glance, my shaking hands, Noah's unsteady breathing, the half-empty glass still sitting on the table behind me. And then he spoke again, quieter this time, but somehow even more commanding. He needs a hospital now. I nodded before I realized I was doing it. My voice caught somewhere between panic and relief. Something is wrong. I could not finish the sentence, because saying it out loud would make it real, and I was not ready for that. I was not ready for the possibility that I had missed something, that I had failed to protect him. But Adrian did not wait for me to explain. He did not need the full story. He already had enough. He turned slightly, just enough to signal without raising his voice, "Get the car ready." And somewhere behind him, movement snapped into place, footsteps quick and precise, like this was not chaos to them. This was routine, and that realization should have scared me. But it did not. Not right now, because right now chaos felt safer in his hands than anywhere else. I shifted Noah in my arms, pressing my cheek against his hair. "Stay with me, baby, just stay with me," I whispered, over and over, like if I said it enough times it would anchor him here. And then Adrian's hand appeared in my line of sight, not touching me, just there, steady, grounding. "Give him to me," he said, and something in me resisted instantly. Instinct, fear, the need to never let go. But my arms were shaking, my strength was slipping, and he saw that too. Of course he did. He saw everything. "I will not drop him," he added, not defensive, just factual. And I realized then that he was not asking permission. He was offering certainty, and that was something I did not have. So slowly, carefully, I let him take Noah, watching the way he held him, firm but controlled, like he understood exactly how much pressure to use, like he had done this before. And that thought barely had time to form before it was replaced by another one. Sharper, colder. I turned my head, searching, and found Ryan exactly where I had left him, standing near the table, pale, frozen, his eyes flicking between me and Adrian and the glass on the counter. And in that moment the fear inside me changed shape. It was no longer just panic. It was something deeper, something steadier. And when Adrian spoke again, without even looking at Ryan, his voice carried across the room like a quiet verdict. "No one leaves." I understood that whatever happened next, the truth was about to come out, and it was not going to be something anyone could pretend did not exist. The hallway doors burst open before I could think, cold night air rushing in as someone held them wide, and everything moved faster than my mind could keep up with, footsteps echoing against concrete, the sharp click of a car unlocking somewhere just outside. And Adrian did not hesitate for a second, carrying Noah like he belonged in his arms, like this was not the first time he had stepped into chaos and turned it into order. I followed, so close I nearly ran into him when he stopped beside a black SUV idling at the curb, the engine humming low, steady, like it had been waiting for us all along. The rear door opened instantly, and he slid Noah inside with careful precision, adjusting his position, making sure his head was supported before he turned to me. "Get in," he said, not harsh, not soft, just certain, and I obeyed without questioning, climbing in beside my son, my hands immediately finding his face, his hair, checking his breathing again even though I had done it 100 times already. Adrian took the seat across from us, the door shut, and the car moved before I even realized someone had started driving. The city lights streaking past the tinted windows, blurred and distant, like the world outside no longer mattered. "He is breathing," Adrian said, watching me, his voice calm in a way that made my panic feel louder. "Stay with him." I nodded, swallowing hard, forcing myself to focus, counting each rise and fall of Noah's chest. 1, 2, 3, like numbers could hold him here, like counting could keep him safe. But my thoughts kept pulling me back to the kitchen, to the glass, to Ryan's face, and the way he had looked when I asked him what he did. Not shocked, not confused, just caught. And that realization settled into my chest like something heavy and unmovable. I looked up, meeting Adrian's eyes for the first time since we left. "He did something," I said, my voice quieter now, steadier, because panic was slowly turning into something sharper. "Ryan did something to that drink." Adrian did not react the way I expected. No surprise, no doubt. just a slight shift in his expression, like he had already reached that conclusion minutes ago. "I know," he replied, and those two words should have terrified me. But instead they grounded me, because someone else saw it too. Someone else understood. The car took a sharp turn, tires gripping the road. And then Adrian leaned forward slightly, his attention never leaving Noah. "Did your son complain about taste?" he asked, precise, clinical, like every detail mattered. I shook my head, trying to remember. "No, he just stopped, like something was wrong." Adrian nodded once, processing, already building something in his mind I could not see. "Good," he said, quietly, and I blinked at him, confused. "Good?" He met my gaze, steady. "It means whatever was in that glass was not meant to be obvious." The implication hit me instantly, cold and sharp. This was not an accident, not carelessness, not a mistake. It was deliberate, controlled, planned, and my hands tightened around Noah as a new wave of emotion surged through me. Not panic this time. Something darker, something protective, something that made my voice drop into a whisper. "Why would he do that?" I asked, more to myself than to him, but Adrian answered anyway. "People do not act without reason," he said. "They act with intention." The car slowed, turning into a brightly lit emergency entrance, red and white signs glowing against the night. And before we fully stopped, the doors opened again. People already moving toward us. Nurses, staff. Ready, prepared, like they had been warned. And Adrian stepped out first, handing Noah over with the same controlled precision he had used since the moment he took him from me. I followed, my legs barely keeping up, my eyes locked on my son as they rushed him inside. Voices calling out instructions I could not process, until suddenly everything stopped again, not physically, but inside me, because I felt it. That same presence from before, steady, unshaken, and when I turned, Adrian was right. Behind me, close enough that I could hear his voice without him raising it. "He will be treated immediately," he said, and I believed him, not because of what he said, but because of who he was. And then, after a brief pause, his gaze shifted past me, back toward the direction we had come from, and his next words were quieter, colder, carrying something final beneath them. "And he will be answered for." I did not realize I had stopped breathing until the automatic doors closed behind them and Noah disappeared from my sight, swallowed by bright lights and fast-moving hands and voices that sounded calm but urgent. And suddenly I had nothing to hold on to. No small fingers in mine. No steady rhythm to count. Just empty air and the echo of my own heartbeat pounding too loud in my ears. I stood there for a second too long, frozen in place like my body had not caught up to what just happened, until my knees almost gave out and I grabbed the edge of a nearby chair to steady myself, the plastic cold under my fingers, grounding in a way nothing else was. "Ma'am, please have a seat," someone said gently, but I barely heard them. My eyes still locked on the hallway where they had taken him, like if I looked away even for a second something worse would happen, like my attention alone was keeping him safe. And then that presence again, steady, unshaken. Adrian stepped beside me without a sound. Not touching me, not crowding me. Just there, close enough that I could feel the shift in the air around him. "Sit," he said quietly. And this time it was not a suggestion. It was something else, something firm but not forceful, like he understood exactly how close I was to breaking. And I listened, lowering myself into the chair because standing felt impossible, my hands still trembling in my lap, my fingers twisting together like I could physically hold myself together if I tried hard enough. The seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last, the sounds of the hospital blending into a dull hum, carts rolling, distant voices, the soft beeping of machines somewhere beyond the walls, and all of it felt too normal for what was happening inside me, too calm for the kind of fear that had taken root in my chest. "He will stabilize," Adrian said after a moment, his voice cutting through the noise like a clean line. I turned to him slowly, searching his face for anything that looked like uncertainty, but there was none, just that same controlled focus, like he had already calculated every possible outcome and chosen the one that would happen. "You do not know that," I whispered, my voice raw, fragile in a way I hated, because I needed certainty, and he was offering it like it was something simple, something guaranteed. His gaze did not waver. "I would not be here if I did not," he replied, and something about that answer settled deeper than logic, Because it was not reassurance, it was conviction, and I realized then that he did not speak to comfort people. He spoke when he intended something to be true. Silence fell between us again, but it was different now, less chaotic, more contained. Like his presence had drawn a boundary around the panic trying to consume me, my thoughts began to piece themselves together again, slower, clearer, and they all led back to the same place. Ryan. The way he looked, the way he hesitated, the way he did not deny it. I lifted my head, my voice steadier now, sharper. He knew. I said, more statement than question. Adrian's eyes flicked toward me briefly, acknowledging. Yes, just that. Nothing more, no explanation, no hesitation, just confirmation. And that single word shifted something inside me, because doubt had been replaced with certainty. And certainty was heavier, colder, harder to carry. Why would he do that to a child? I asked, and this time I needed an answer, needed something that made sense. But Adrian did not answer immediately. His gaze moved past me, toward the entrance, toward the world outside these walls, like he was already looking beyond the question. To what came next? People reveal themselves under pressure, he said finally, sometimes too late. I followed his line of sight without meaning to, the glass doors reflecting the night beyond, and for a brief second I imagined Ryan out there, waiting, thinking he could explain this, thinking he could fix it. And the idea made something in me harden, not fear, not panic, something quieter, stronger. And when I looked back at Adrian, I realized he had already seen that change in me, already. Understood it. His voice dropped slightly, lower, more deliberate. You trusted him, he said, not as a question, but as a fact. I nodded once, the motion small but heavy, and his expression did not soften. It sharpened, just slightly. Then you deserve the truth, he continued. And there was something final in the way he said it, something that made it clear that whatever came next was not going to be hidden, not going to be avoided, not going to be explained away. And for the first time since this began, I was not just waiting for news about my son. I was waiting for something else entirely, something that felt inevitable, something that had already been set in motion the moment that glass touched Noah's lips. I do not know how long I sat there, staring at the same set of double doors like they might open faster if I did not blink, like time itself would move differently if I focused hard enough. But eventually the world forced its way back in, the quiet footsteps in the hallway, the distant ringing of a phone at the nurse station, the low murmur of voices that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with life, continuing whether I was ready or not. And then I heard it, my name, Emily, soft, but deliberate. And I turned just enough to see Adrian already holding a phone to his ear, speaking in a tone I had not heard before, still calm, still controlled, but sharper, more precise, like every word was placed exactly where it needed to land. Confirm what was in the glass, he said, not asking, instructing. A brief pause, then, no delays, and the call ended just as quickly as it began. He lowered the phone, his attention returning to me like nothing else existed. They are running a toxicology screen, he said, and I nodded slowly, trying to process the words, trying to hold on to something concrete, something factual, because everything else felt too unstable. He is going to be okay, right? I asked, and I hated how small my voice sounded, how it betrayed the fear I was trying to control. Adrian did not answer immediately, and that silence stretched just long enough to make my chest tighten again. But when he did speak, his voice carried that same certainty that had grounded me. Before, he received help quickly, he said. That matters. It was not a promise, but it was the closest thing to truth I had. And I clung to it anyway, because I had nothing else. My hands tightened together again, my mind circling back, always back, to the same question, the same image, the same moment. He did not even try to stop me. I said quietly, more to myself than to him. Adrian's gaze sharpened slightly. Ryan, he clarified, and I nodded, swallowing hard. When I asked him, he just stood there. I could still see it. The way his expression had flickered, not with guilt exactly, but with calculation, like he was deciding what version of the truth to offer. And that realization made something inside me twist, something painful and final. He was not surprised. I added, and this time Adrian responded without hesitation, no. Just that single word again. Heavy, certain, undeniable. I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding, and it came out shakier than I expected, because this was no longer confusion, no longer doubt. It was clarity, and clarity hurt more than he meant to do it. I said, my voice barely above a whisper, and Adrian did not soften the truth, did not cushion it. Yes, the word landed harder this time, because I was ready for it, and not ready at all. Silence settled between us again, but it was no longer empty. It was full of everything that had just been confirmed, everything that could not be undone. And then Adrian moved. Just slightly, enough for me to notice. He stepped closer to the window that overlooked the entrance, his posture unchanged, but his focus shifting outward, like part of him had already moved on to the next step, the next action, the next consequence. He is still there, Adrian said, not turning back to me, and I followed his gaze instinctively, my heart stuttering as I looked through the glass, past the reflection of fluorescent lights, and saw the outline of a familiar figure near the curb, pacing, checking his phone, running a hand through his hair like he always did when he was nervous. Ryan, waiting, and the sight of him did something unexpected, something that surprised even me, because the fear I thought I would feel was not there, not anymore. It had been replaced by something else, something steadier, colder, something that did not shake. He thinks he can explain, I said, my voice quieter now, but stronger. Adrian turned his head slightly, just enough to catch my expression, and I saw the shift in his eyes, the recognition of something changing inside me. He will try, Adrian replied, and there was no judgment in his tone, no doubt, just observation, and then he added, almost as an afterthought, but not really, but explanation does not change intention. I looked back at Ryan, watching him through the glass, and for the first time since this began, I was not seeing the man I thought I loved. I was seeing someone else entirely, someone I did not know, someone who had made a choice that could not be undone. And as that realization settled in fully, I felt something inside me lock into place, something final, something that did not break or bend. And when I spoke again, my voice did not tremble. I want to know why, I said, and Adrian's response came immediately, calm, certain, inevitable. You will. And in the way he said it, I understood that whatever truth Ryan had been holding on to, whatever reason he thought justified what he did, it was not going to stay hidden for much longer. The moment stretched thin between us, heavy with everything unsaid, until the sound of the automatic doors sliding open broke it. A sharp rush of cool air sweeping into the hallway, and I did not have to look to know who it was, because I felt it before I saw him. That familiar shift in the air, that presence I used to mistake for comfort. Ryan stepped inside, his eyes scanning quickly until they landed on me. Relief flashing across his face so fast, it almost looked real, almost convincing. Emily, he said, breathless, like he had been running, like he cared, like nothing had changed, and for a second, just a second, I saw the man I thought I knew, the one who used to bring coffee in the mornings, who helped Noah with homework, who told me everything was going to be okay. But that version of him did not survive what I had already seen, what I already knew. Is he okay? Ryan asked, stepping closer, his voice tight, controlled, but not enough to hide the strain underneath, and I did not answer him. Not right away, because I was watching him, really watching him now, the way his hands moved, the way his eyes flickered, the way he kept glancing past me, toward Adrian, measuring, calculating, and that told me more than any explanation could. You tell me, I said finally, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me, and Ryan froze for half a second, just long enough to confirm everything. I do not know what you are talking about, he replied, too quickly, too clean, the kind of denial that came prepared, not instinctive, and something inside me hardened further, something that refused to let him rewrite what had already happened. You gave him that drink, I said, each word deliberate, precise, like I was placing them exactly where they belonged, and Ryan shook his head, a small, controlled movement. It was just juice, he said, but he did not meet my eyes when he said it, and that was all I needed. Look at me, I said, sharper now, and this time he did, his gaze locking onto mine, and for a moment neither of us spoke, because this was no longer about the words, it was about what sat behind them. The truth he was trying to hide and the certainty I was no longer willing to ignore. What did you put in it? I asked again, quieter now, but heavier. and the silence that followed stretched longer than before, too long for innocence, too long for confusion, and then he exhaled slowly, like he had been holding something in and finally decided to release it. "It was not supposed to be like this," he said, and those words landed harder than anything else, because they were not a denial. They were an admission wrapped in regret. My breath caught, my fingers tightening instinctively. "Not supposed to be like what?" I pressed, my voice low, controlled, but there was something beneath it now, something dangerous, something that had replaced the fear completely. Ryan glanced toward Adrian again, just for a second, and that was when Adrian finally moved, stepping forward just enough to shift the balance of the space. Not interrupting, not raising his voice, just existing closer. And suddenly Ryan's posture changed, subtly, but noticeably, like he understood the weight of who stood in front of him. "You should not be here," Ryan said, directing it at Adrian. But there was no real authority in his tone, just discomfort. Adrian's response was immediate, calm, absolute. "You should not have touched the glass." And the room went still, completely still, because there was no arguing with that, no deflecting it. It cut straight through everything. Ryan's jaw tightened, his composure slipping just enough to reveal the truth underneath. "It was a sedative," he said finally, his voice lower now, less certain. "A small dose. I just needed him to sleep." The words echoed in my head, slow, distorted, like my mind refused to process them at full speed. "You drugged my son," I said, not a question, not anymore. And Ryan stepped forward slightly, his hands lifting in a gesture that was meant to calm, to explain. "I was trying to help," he insisted. And that was the moment something inside me snapped completely into place, not loudly, not violently, just final. Because help did not look like this. Help did not hide in a glass. Help did not come with hesitation and lies. "Help who?" I asked, and Ryan hesitated again. That same fatal pause, and I saw it then. The truth he did not want to say out loud. Not for Noah, not for me, but for something else entirely, something he thought mattered more. And when he did not answer, he did not have to, because the silence said everything. And beside me, Adrian's voice cut through it, colder. Now, quieter, but carrying something unmistakable beneath it. "Now we understand intention." And in that moment, I knew this was no longer about what happened. It was about what came next, and nothing Ryan said after this was going to change that. Ryan's words did not echo this time. They settled, heavy and suffocating, like the air itself had. Thickened around us, and I stared at him. Really stared, searching for something that resembled the man I once trusted, but all I saw now was someone who had made a choice and was trying to reshape it into something acceptable, something forgivable. "You were trying to help," I repeated slowly, the words tasting wrong even as I said them. And Ryan nodded quickly, stepping closer like proximity might make his version of the truth more believable. "He has not been sleeping well." "Emily," you said. "It yourself? Nightmares, anxiety." I just wanted him to rest. His voice softened, almost pleading now, but there was something underneath it, something calculated, something that did not align with concern, and I felt it immediately. That quiet instinct rising again, the one that had warned me before, the one I would never ignore again. "So you decided to drug him," I said, my tone flat, stripped of everything except the facts, and Ryan flinched slightly at the word, like the label itself was too harsh for what he had done. "It was not like that," he insisted, but his explanation came too fast, too rehearsed. "It was a low dose, completely safe." I checked. I would never hurt him. And for the first time since this conversation began, I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Only disbelief, only the sharp edge of realization. "You already did," I said quietly. And that was when the silence shifted again, heavier, more final, because there was no arguing with that truth. Not anymore. Ryan's expression tightened, frustration creeping in where concern had been. "You are overreacting," he said, and those words, more than anything else, erased whatever remained of doubt, because overreacting was what people said when they wanted to minimize what could not be undone, when they needed the other person to question their own instincts, and I was done doing that, completely done. He stopped breathing normally. I said, my voice steady, controlled, each word deliberate. He could not stand, He could not speak clearly, and you are telling me that is safe. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out immediately, and that hesitation said more than any explanation could. And beside me, Adrian shifted slightly, not interrupting, not stepping in yet, but his presence alone seemed to press the truth closer to the surface. You did not tell me. I continued, my gaze locked on Ryan. You did not ask me. You did not warn me. You just did it. And now my voice carried something else, not panic, not fear, but clarity, sharp and unyielding. Why? I asked again, and this time the word was heavier, deeper, because it was no longer about the act. It was about the reason behind it. Ryan's eyes flickered again. That same pattern, that same calculation, and I saw it now for what it was, not confusion, not regret, but selection. He was choosing what to say, what to reveal, what to hide. I thought it would make things easier, he said finally, and that answer landed wrong immediately. Too vague, too detached from what had actually happened. Easier for who? I pressed, and this time he did not answer right away, and that silence stretched just long enough to confirm everything I needed to know. Because if it had been for Noah, the answer would have come instantly, naturally, without hesitation, but it did not. And that meant the truth sat somewhere else, somewhere he did not want to expose. Adrian's voice cut in then, low and controlled, but carrying something colder now, something final. You acted without consent, he said, not loud, not aggressive, just stating a fact that could not be undone. Ryan's jaw tightened, his eyes shifting toward Adrian again. But there was no challenge there anymore, no confidence, just tension, because the balance of power had already shifted and he knew it. It was a mistake, Ryan said, trying again, reaching for something that might still repair this. But it was too late, far too late, because mistakes did not look like hesitation and calculation and silence when the truth mattered most. No, I said, shaking my head slowly, my voice calm in a way I had never heard it before. It was a decision. And the moment those words left my mouth, I felt it. Something inside me settled completely, something that no longer wavered. And when I looked at Ryan again, I was not seeing someone I needed to understand. I was seeing someone I needed to hold accountable. And beside me, Adrian did not speak again. He did not need to, because the line had already been drawn, clear and unbreakable, and there was no stepping back from it now. The air did not move after I said it, like the entire hallway had paused just long enough to let the truth settle into every corner. And Ryan felt it. I could see it in the way his shoulders stiffened, in the way his eyes lost that last bit of control he had been holding on to, because this was no longer a conversation he could steer, no longer something he could soften or redirect. This was final. And for the first time since he walked in, he did not step closer. He did not try to close the distance between us. He stayed exactly where he was, like something invisible had drawn a line he could not cross. Emily, he said again, quieter now. But there was something different in it. Not confidence, not even persuasion, just a trace of something slipping. You are making this bigger than it is. And those words should have shaken me, should have planted doubt, but they did not. Not anymore, because I could see the pattern now, the minimizing, the deflection, the careful choice of language that made his actions seem smaller than they were. And once you see something clearly, you cannot unsee it. My son is in a hospital room because of you, I said, my voice steady, not raised, not emotional, just undeniable. And Ryan inhaled sharply, like he wanted to argue but could not find the right angle. He is going to be fine, he insisted, and I almost shook my head, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it, like the outcome mattered more than the act itself. Like if everything turned out okay, then what he did would somehow be acceptable. And that was the moment I understood him completely, not just what he did, but how he thought, how he justified, how he crossed lines, and then convinced himself they were never there. And that understanding did not bring relief. It brought distance, permanent and irreversible. That does not change what you chose to do, I replied, and the words felt solid, grounded, like something I could stand on. Ryan's expression shifted again, frustration edging in where control used to be. You are acting like I tried to hurt him, he said, and there it was, the final piece, the last attempt to rewrite reality into something he could live with. And I met his gaze without hesitation, without fear, You made a decision about his body without his mother, I said, each word deliberate. That is harm. And the silence that followed was heavier than anything before, because there was no arguing with that. Not logically, not honestly. And for a moment, Ryan said nothing, his eyes searching mine like he was looking for some version of me that would still bend, still question, still give him room to explain. But that version was gone, completely gone, and he saw that too. I watched the realization settle into his expression, slow but undeniable. And that was when Adrian moved again. Just one step forward, not aggressive, not rushed, but enough to shift the entire balance of the space. Enough to remind everyone exactly who was in control now. His voice when he spoke was quiet, almost calm, but it carried something deeper, something final. This conversation is over, he said, and it was not a suggestion. It was a conclusion. Ryan turned toward him, tension visible now, not hidden anymore. You do not get to decide that, he said, but the words lacked weight, lacked certainty, because even he knew they were not true. Adrian did not raise his voice, did not react to the challenge. He simply looked at him, steady, unwavering, and in that look was something that made everything else irrelevant. I already did, he replied, and that was it. No escalation, no argument, just a line drawn. So clearly it did not need to be repeated. And then Adrian turned slightly toward me, his attention shifting with precision, like Ryan was no longer part of the equation. You should be with your son, he said, and the words cut through everything else, through the tension, through the noise, through the weight of what had just happened, because he was right. That was where I needed to be, not here, not in this conversation, not in this moment that had already revealed everything it needed to. I took a breath, steadying myself, and for a brief second I looked at Ryan again, not with anger, not even with sadness, just clarity, complete and absolute. And then I turned away, because there was nothing left to say, nothing left to understand, only what came next. And as I walked toward the hallway, where Noah had been taken, I heard Adrian's voice behind me one last time, lower now, quieter, but carrying something that made me stop for just a fraction of a second before continuing forward. He will not be near you again. And I did not turn back, because I already knew that was not a promise, it was a certainty. I did not remember the walk down the hallway, only the way my steps felt too light, like my body had separated from everything that had just happened, like I was moving on instinct alone, following the direction my heart was pulling me. And then I saw him, Noah, lying in the hospital bed, smaller than I had ever seen him, surrounded by quiet machines and soft lights that made everything feel fragile and temporary. And the moment I crossed that doorway, everything else disappeared, the voices, the tension, the weight of what Ryan had done. All of it faded into the background, because none of it mattered as much as the rise and fall of my son's chest, steady now, slower, controlled. I moved to his side immediately, my hand finding his without hesitation, warm, alive, real, and the breath I had been holding since the moment he collapsed finally released, long and unsteady. I am here, I whispered, even though he could not hear me yet, even though his eyes remained closed, because I needed to say it, needed to anchor myself in something that was still mine, something that had not been taken or changed or questioned. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time did not move the same in that room. It stretched and softened, bending around the quiet rhythm of recovery, until eventually there was a shift, small, almost unnoticeable. His fingers twitched against mine, just slightly, but enough, more than enough. Noah, I breathed, leaning closer, my heart catching in my throat as his eyes slowly opened, unfocused at first, then finding me, confusion flickering across his face before recognition settled in. Mom, he murmured, his voice weak, but there, present, and I felt something inside me break and rebuild at the same time, relief flooding through every part of me, steady and overwhelming. You scared me, I said softly, brushing his hair back, my touch gentle, careful, like he was something precious that could not be risked again. I feel weird, he whispered, and I nodded, keeping my voice calm, steady. That is okay. You are safe now. And for the first time since all of this began, those words felt true, completely true, because I understood what safety meant now, not just comfort, not just familiarity, but protection, awareness. boundaries that could not be crossed without consequence. I stayed with him, talking quietly, grounding him, grounding myself, until the room felt steady again, until the fear that had consumed me turned into something quieter, something stronger. And when I finally stepped back, just for a moment, just enough to breathe, I noticed him standing near the doorway, not inside the room, not intruding, just present. Adrian. Exactly where he had been from the beginning, close enough to act, far enough to give space. His gaze met mine briefly, and there was no question in it, no uncertainty, just acknowledgement. Like everything that needed to be said had already been understood, I moved toward him slowly, careful, not to disturb Noah. And when I stopped a few feet away, I realized I did not know what to say, not exactly, because gratitude felt too small, and explanation felt unnecessary. So I chose the only thing that mattered. He is okay, I said, and Adrian nodded once, like that had always been the expected outcome. Like anything else had never been an option. Silence settled between us again, but it was different now, lighter, resolved. And then he spoke, his voice low, steady, carrying that same quiet certainty that had guided everything from the moment he stepped in. No one will make decisions for your son again, he said, and the words were simple, but they carried weight, finality, a boundary that did not need to be defended because it would not be crossed. I held his gaze for a moment longer, letting that settle, letting it become something I could trust, not blindly, not without thought, but with understanding. And then I nodded, not as agreement, but as acknowledgement, because this was not just about protection anymore. It was about knowing when to stand, when to act, when to never ignore that instinct again. I turned back toward Noah, toward the quiet room that now felt like a place of recovery instead of fear. And as I stepped inside, I realized something had changed permanently, not just around me, but within me, because trust was no longer something given easily, and safety was no longer something assumed. And as I sat beside my son once more, his small hand still wrapped in mine, I understood the truth that would stay with me long after this night ended. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He simply drew a line, and no one would cross it again.